Hey guys, Pie Guy Rules here, and welcome back to every episode of SpongeBob Season 4 Reviewed. So Season 4 is where things are about to get really interesting. Like, really interesting. We're out of what is considered to be the classic or Hillenburg era, but in my personal opinion, we haven't quite entered the new era. Season 4 is like a transitional period. From what I remember of this season, it's definitely a mixed bag. Of course, my memory is kind of skewed because, well, Nickelodeon released half of the season on DVD before it aired on TV. So I got the DVD, marathon the episodes, and haven't went back to watch a lot of these episodes in years. There are a few that I keep coming back to because they are just really great. I remember that when I first watched them, and I still feel that way now, but there's a lot of these episodes that just aren't particularly interesting, or at least they weren't when I initially watched them. Is that still the case? Well, I guess you'll have to keep watching to find out. There isn't really many changes in the format this time, and I'm sure you'll pick up on them along the way, so with that, let's just dive right into Season 4. Episode 61A, Fear of a Krabby Patty. After working for a few days straight, SpongeBob becomes afraid of Krabby Patties. My favorite part of the episode is Dr. Peter Langton. If you look at this episode from a SpongeBob perspective, it's actually really annoying and not very good. Actually, this episode pretty much starts with SpongeBob screaming, which is not a very good sign for the post-movie episodes. However, if you look at it from Plankton's perspective, and especially in the second half of the episode where Plankton is counseling SpongeBob, the episode is really, really funny, and I think a lot of the therapy jokes work very well. And for all of those reasons, I would consider it a good episode. Also of note in this episode is that something seems to be really wrong with the character models for Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs' eye stalks are too short in a couple of scenes and not bent the way they should be. SpongeBob seems to be a little bit taller, maybe his eyes are bigger. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what's wrong, but there's definitely something off with the character models in this episode. Episode 61B, Shell of a Man. After Mr. Krabs molts his shell, SpongeBob must impersonate him at a Navy reunion. My favorite part is all of the revelations at the end, all of the tough Navy guys revealing that pretty much all of their personas are lies nowadays because they're gotten so old. There's a few episodes from this season that really stand out in my mind. When I was a kid, most of these episodes I didn't see more than once. I watched them and then I was done with the season. However, a few of them, this included, stood out in my mind so much that I would continue to go back to this DVD set explicitly to see those episodes. Shell of a Man is one of those episodes. So yes, it is a good episode. All you really need to know is that it's SpongeBob having to portray Mr. Krabs at a tough guy army reunion, and you'll know that it is a classic setup. There is some good visual humor with Mr. Krabs' shell, but primarily, the jokes from this episode come from SpongeBob, the big weenie that he is, having to pretend to be a tough guy like Mr. Krabs. Episode 62A, The Lost Mattress. After Mr. Krabs' money-filled mattress gets thrown away, SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward must get it back from an angry guardworm. My favorite part about this episode, hands down, is Patrick. He actually sees through some of Squidward's shenanigans. He calls him out on the fact that he didn't pay for the mattress, and he does a few things in this episode that indicates he's not as stupid as everyone thinks he is. I like that. I like the stupid character who can occasionally make the most sense out of everyone. And there's still some stupid jokes here. It's not like his characterization is completely off, they just threw him a bone. That's not all though. There's a lot of good jokes from the angry guardworm slapstick stuff to Mr. Krabs being at the hospital and having to be constantly moved. There's some good jokes here, and it's a really good episode. This episode relies on breaking continuity entirely. When has Mr. Krabs ever slept on a mattress? Every time it's been a hammock, and we've seen his hammock a number of times. This episode completely breaks that just to tell a story, but it works. And I don't care about the continuity because the story works. It's an interesting and funny story that makes sense for the characters. Yeah, it throws that one little piece of continuity out the window, but you know what? It was worth it. If an episode can retcon something and still work, then I think that proves that it's a pretty strong episode. Episode 62B, Krabs vs. Plankton. After Plankton slips in the Krusty Krab, he decides to sue for the formula. My favorite part of this episode is SpongeBob Lawyer Pants, for a few reasons. First of all, this is the first portrayal of SpongeBob this season that I think is actually accurate. Up till now, he hasn't been the best of characters. He's been crying a lot, he's been laughing a lot, he's been doing a lot of stupid things, and the spotlight's actually been on Mr. Krabs and Plankton. And while, yes, this episode does still keep the spotlight on Mr. Krabs and Plankton, SpongeBob does have a very strong presence in this episode. Also, seeing SpongeBob trying to be serious even though he's such a goofball is some really good stuff. And they've never had an episode set in a courtroom before, so it's original and fresh here. It's a good episode. Even though I don't quite think they've gotten the main character's character down, we're off to a pretty good start here. A little thing that I like about this episode is that it begins with Plankton on a mattress, which is actually like a nice wraparound because the last episode was all about a mattress, and this one starts off with Plankton on a mattress. Episode 63. Have you seen this snail? After SpongeBob forgets to feed Gary, he runs away. So there's a few things I actually have to mention about this episode. It is indeed a special episode, but no, there's no Patchy segments. I'm not sure why, but the other special this season doesn't have Patchy segments either. Maybe it's just so they could tell a longer story, maybe the Patchy stuff was just wearing thin. I don't know, but it's not here, and honestly, in this episode, it kind of shows. It could really use something more lighthearted to break up this kind of depressing episode. Another unusual thing about it is that it's like the first time that Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy have been referenced without actually appearing, and not being a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy episode explicitly. It's actually kind of nice to see, hey, they exist out of these select few episodes. So my favorite joke of the episode is the fact that Patrick actually won in paddleball in the Dirty Bowl Challenge, but then he lost the trophy. I like it because the joke is set up like Patrick took the challenge and lost and it ruined his life. But no, the joke is that he won, he just lost the trophy. And sadly, it's telling that that's my favorite part about this 22-minute special. One subtle joke that really doesn't even relate to the main plot at all. Here's the thing about this special, it's not funny. There's a few jokes, but more of this episode is actually just depressing. Seeing how sad SpongeBob is because he blew it with Gary is just really sad. And this is punctuated by the really sad song that goes on for way too long in the middle of this episode and kind of feels like padding. I mean, really, there isn't even much to this story. Gary runs away, finds an old lady to live with, and SpongeBob is sad and just puts up flyers to try and get him back. It's almost like a realistic portrayal of a pet running away. Plus, didn't we kind of have this story in Dumped already? I appreciate that the SpongeBob writers are trying to get me to feel emotions other than just laughing, but come on, SpongeBob is a comedy that doesn't follow any sort of continuity. If you actually believe that he was gonna lose Gary, then you probably don't know too much about the structure of these episodes. So there's really nothing at stake here, and so there's not really any reason for me to care. However, I will give the episode points because there's really nothing about it that makes it unwatchable, and the few jokes that they do tell work. The song, although kind of depressing and perhaps going on a bit too long, is actually kind of catchy, so I'm gonna go ahead and give this episode a meh. Yeah, it's definitely not what you want to look for in an episode of SpongeBob, but you could do a lot worse. The episode is definitely passable, even though it is very flawed. Episode 64A, Skill Crane. Squidward becomes obsessed with a claw machine at the Krusty Krab. My favorite part about this episode is when Squidward goes to pick up things at his home and he just cannot. It is some great sound mixing with some just great reactions from Squidward. It is really, really funny. This episode does a few things that a lot of people don't like. It tortures Squidward for very little reason. It just kind of seems like the universe is against him. And while I get how that can be frustrating in a lot of episodes, I feel like this episode kind of balances it very nicely. Squidward is a jerk at parts of this episode, but he's also kind of sympathetic. And this is an extremely realistic situation. Claw machines are evil. I know. I used to play them a lot as a kid, and I was good at them. Although recently they seem to have exclusively rigged all of them so they're impossible to play. But sometimes it just seems like some people get all the luck and others just cannot catch a break with these machines. It's ironic that it's called a skill crane because a lot of it is just luck. Anyway, I think this is a good episode, and maybe it's my bias because I really love claw machines, but I think the episode is just well put together. It's funny, it knows exactly where to go for every character. Mr. Krabs is a little bit of a jerk, but he's not overly greedy. Squidward pretty much does all the punishment to himself by continuing to play the game, and Mr. Krabs even gets comeuppance at the end with the Krusty Krab breaking. Squidward's a little bit of a jerk, so it warrants the punishment he gets, but he's still also sympathetic. SpongeBob is actually realistic here with more than just blind happiness or sadness as an emotion. He even gets a little bit fed up with Squidward when he's being cocky. Episode 64B, Good Neighbors. Squidward tries to have a relaxing Sunday. My favorite part about this episode is the opening shots of Squidward, SpongeBob, Patrick sleeping. It's really nicely edited and is a nice way to start off the episode. Unfortunately, everything else is downhill from there. This is a
SpongeBob episode
through and through. This is a Squidward torture episode done wrong. What does Squidward want to do in this episode? Just have a relaxing Sunday. And SpongeBob and Patrick ruin it beyond belief in ways that just aren't even funny. They're just so ignorant of the world around them and Squidward's emotions that it's not funny, and there's not even an excuse in this episode. I mean, yes, there's Naughty Nautical Neighbors, which starts off with Squidward being a jerk to SpongeBob and Patrick. Then there's Jellyfishing, which involves Squidward being bandaged up so SpongeBob and Patrick don't know that he hates what they're doing. In this episode, they just have no excuse. They're just idiots, and none of it is funny. And there's also a random giant robot at the end of this episode Squidward's house turns into. It's stupid, it's frustrating to watch, nothing is funny, and it just makes you feel so bad for Squidward. Also, this episode made me think about toenails in Squidward's house. Thankfully, though, this isn't that episode. But we'll get there. Oh man, we'll get there. It's ironic that an episode with good in the title would turn out to be so bad. Episode 65A, Selling Out. Mr. Krabs sells Krusty Krab to a conglomerate. My favorite part is actually not the musical number. I think it's a catchy song, and I think that it actually makes a nice theme song for Nickelodeon these days. But the fact that he's just singing about how he likes money more than he likes his daughter Pearl is a bit much. Also, why is there a bird underwater? However, him being flanderized in this song is actually kind of made up for at the end, where he buys back the Krusty Krab, realizing there are some things that are more important than money. My favorite part of the episode is his ending monologue, which I've included there for you. It's a little bit tarnished by the fact that he says he doesn't mean it like a second later, but I think he's just covering for his true emotions. He actually does care about SpongeBob, Squidward, and the Krusty Krab more than money, which is a nice step in the right direction for his character. So what am I giving this episode? Meh. Yeah, it actually does some nice things for Mr. Krabs' character, but honestly, it's not that funny. And if a SpongeBob episode isn't funny, then it fails on some level. The plot is actually really good, and probably even better than most plots from season 1 through 3, but if it's not funny, then it's not gonna get a good episode grade. That's why you come to see SpongeBob. You don't come for the plot. If the plot is good, then that's great. I'm glad to see that they're taking steps to making the plot more complex, but if it comes at the sake of comedy, then it's just not worth it. You're gonna see that this sums up a lot of the episodes in season 4. Good plot, but unfortunately, just not that funny. I'm also going to mention the fun fact here because it's really annoying. Mr. Krabs says later in the episode that he doesn't know how to ride a bike, yet early on we see him with a photo album teaching Pearl how to ride one. Seriously, you can't keep your continuity straight in 11 minutes, guys? I understand why you don't want to keep it from episode to episode, but it's only a few minute time span between these two gags. And the photo could have been swapped out for another memory so easily. And in fact, the photo album's only there so he could say that horrible joke about how he cares about money more than Pearl. Episode 65B, Funny Pants. Squidward convinces SpongeBob not to laugh for an entire day. I was very conflicted on how to feel about this episode. It was somewhere between meh and ScumBob. There are some things I like the Patrick and the banana peel gag, as cheesy as it is just really funny. I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I like the stupid humor, but really I think it works. Unfortunately, there's not actually that many other funny things in this episode, which is kind of ironic, and that's probably why I included that quote over there. The thing is, the plot itself is not bad. The idea of Squidward convincing SpongeBob not to laugh for an entire day and then SpongeBob thinking he's lost his ability to laugh, that's a pretty good plot. It's not bad and could have made for a good episode. But no, with it not being funny, it is not a good episode. and I rewatched it, and what really pushed me over the edge from meh right into ScumBob territory is SpongeBob's infernal laughter. They make it even more annoying in this episode by adding a squeaky toy effect to it, and it plays constantly in the episode. And then he cries a lot in the episode. There's also plot holes, like why was SpongeBob in pain in the first place if his laugh box wasn't actually broken? Or are they saying that it was actually broken? And the ending of this episode is also really stupid. So yes, it is a
ScumBob episode.
For a few reasons, and it is a shame because it could have been good, and maybe if it was just a little bit less annoying, it would have gotten the meh. Also, for some reason, Sandy's voice is off in this episode. I don't know, I think it's that her accent just isn't as thick, and she's a little bit more soft-spoken in this episode. Hark! Dunces and Dragons. SpongeBob and Patrick are sent back to the medieval ages and must stop an evil wizard. Before I say anything about the episode proper, I want you to look at that fun fact. 8.5 million people saw this on its premiere. That is really, really impressive for a television show. I need that to soak in, and I can't stress how important it is that many people watched this episode. And you know what? It couldn't have gone to a better episode. This episode is amazing. It is definitely a good episode, and dare I say, one of the best episodes of the entire series. You know why? Because not only is it genuinely funny, it gets the parody right, and you know what? It tells the most epic story that could ever be told in an episode of SpongeBob. Remember how I said that the only thing people come to SpongeBob for is comedy? That's true, and they have to provide that, which they did here, but in addition to that, they provided a somewhat epic story with foreshadowing to the solution, and a beginning, middle, and end, with trials along the way, with things that happen and unexpected parallels, and everything about this episode is great and works. I'm hard-pressed to find something about this episode that I don't actually like. Maybe it's the ending, in that if you want to leave it ambiguous, then don't show Squidly there. It's kind of a lame joke. But aside from that, everything in this episode is fantastic. I almost wish this was like an hour long, because it just really is that good an episode. It's funny and epic, and it gets the time period right. And I don't know what more you could ask for in an episode than that. Episode 67A. Enemy-in-Law. Plankton falls in love with Mama Krabs. This episode is yet another great example of a good story that just isn't funny. It's a decent concept for an episode. Plankton falling in love with Mr. Krabs' mom, especially considering he doesn't know that she knows the secret formula. That's a clever setup. There's a lot of clever things about this episode, but you know what? It's just not funny. There are some jokes in this episode. I like the roll call, if you can call that a joke, and I like the very subtle line that Plankton says that I highlighted there because it's very clever and it's very subtle that they don't actually explain that to you. I like that. But really, by and large, this episode just doesn't have jokes. And you know what it feels like? It feels like a dang soap opera. Who wants a soap opera out of SpongeBob? No one. So, I'm gonna have to give it a meh. Episode 67B, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 6, The Motion Picture. SpongeBob and the gang make a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy film. I'm a film major, in case you didn't know. I think I'm the most qualified person to judge whether or not this is a good episode. And let me tell you, it is definitely a good episode. There is so many great jokes in this episode and such great timing. My favorite one is Pearl's roll. It doesn't make sense because Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy ride around in an invisible boatmobile, but you know what? It's really funny that Pearl is the car, especially with Mr. Krabs' line, Mermaid Man wouldn't get anywhere without you. That is good comedy. Plus Sandy's constant explosives, giving Plankton the boom microphone, Patrick being the cameraman, like it all just fits so perfectly. Although they don't go too deep into parodying the whole making a film, they do kind of touch on how hard it is to do this and how it takes everyone coming together to make a movie right. Really, there's only two things I don't like about this episode. One, Patrick clearly didn't have the lens cap on the camera the entire time. That joke doesn't make much sense. And this one's just a minor nitpick, but I kind of wish there was some sort of meta joke on the SpongeBob movie. I mean, this episode came out right after it. You'd think they would have made some kind of joke. But those complaints are minor, and this is a really good episode. Episode 68A, Patrick Smart Pants. After a head injury, Patrick suddenly becomes smart. I really like Smart Patrick in this episode. Just the way he's portrayed actually really works. I don't know why, but I just feel like from the way his voice is to his mannerisms, it is all just done very well. And I even like the twist at the end of it wasn't just a fall that caused him to become smart, it was the brain coral. Like, that's a nice twist. A weaker show would have just been, oh, head injury, we can do whatever we want. Patrick's character is really strong in this episode, and that's good because it's really what pulls it together. If Patrick, as a smart person, was really annoying and obnoxious and just blech, the episode would not have worked. And yes, he's annoying and obnoxious to the characters, but he's not really annoying and obnoxious to us. I mean, hearing Squidward getting called out for being bad at playing clarinet, that's true. I was almost gonna give this episode a meh, because honestly, as much as I like Smart Patrick and I think this episode is clever on a number of levels, it really isn't that funny. But when I watched it again, it did get a few laughs out of me. There are a few good jokes, and there's a lot of little subtle moments with Patrick being smart in relation to a lot of these other stupid characters. There's even a decent callback in how Patrick kidnaps SpongeBob with a jellyfish net, much like what he tries to do in Nature Pants. So after much deliberation, I decided that this is indeed a good episode. Episode 68B, Squid Bob Tentacle Pants. Sandy's machine accidentally fuses Squidward and SpongeBob together. I just want to point out that this is one of like a million episodes that begins with Squidward waking up, including Good Neighbors just a few episodes ago. Also, this is like one of the first major examples of Sandy going full-on science fiction. Yes, we had a few episodes where she was shown to be really smart, like with Smart Patrick, or teaching SpongeBob how to laugh again. And yes, there is Sandy's rocket from the first season, but here it is full-blown science fiction machines that she's making. So I really like the tone of this episode, probably more than anything else about the episode. They have a lot of science fiction music playing, a lot of really grotesque forms of Squidward and SpongeBob, some dramatic camera angles, that sort of stuff. They really play it up, and they know their science fiction shtick. I mean, we've seen episodes like Plankton before, where, yeah, that's all science fiction right there. However, I don't really think they got any of the comedy right, and this seems to be yet another episode that falls into the category of not a bad plot, but just not funny enough for me to consider it a good episode, so I have to go with meh. I really like this idea. I think so much more could have been done with it. It just isn't funny. Episode 69A, Krusty Towers. Mr. Krabs turns the Krusty Krab into a hotel where the staff is at the mercy of the customers. So my favorite part is the whole laundry in the trunk joke with Mrs. Tentacles, where you think they're stuffing her in the trunk violently, but no, it's just the laundry back there. The joke could have been a lot more tasteless if not done right, but it is just so hilariously funny and dark and just done perfectly. That is a great joke. Add to that a number of other great jokes, and the fact that Squidward actually gets back at Mr. Krabs for making him do so much work, and he gets along with SpongeBob and Patrick. It all adds up to one really good episode. This is definitely one of those episodes that I keep coming back to, and I think it's just as strong, if not stronger, than the best episodes from seasons 2 and 3. It really feels like they recaptured the magic of the characters here. Episode 69B. Mrs. Puff, you're fired. When Mrs. Puff gets fired, a drill sergeant takes her place. This drill sergeant character, Sergeant Saw Roderick, he is a really cool character, and it's cool to see someone be really stern with SpongeBob. And it's cool to see SpongeBob trying really, really hard to pass his test here. There's some great gags, a great character, and a really cool chase scene at the climax. It's a good episode. Oh, and if you're wondering about what clip is reused, it's the little clip of the sponge jumping out of the water. Episode 70A, Ghost Host. The Flying Dutchman crashes at SpongeBob's house and gives up on scaring people. This episode is basically Can You Spare a Dime mixed with Shanghai, in that it involves a character crashing at SpongeBob's place and pushing him too far, as well as a bunch of failed scaring attempts. I'm not a huge fan of deranged animation. I like it when it's used in the right context and with the right amounts, and I think it's used perfectly here. It's actually used so much that SpongeBob becomes unaffected by it, which is kind of like a nice little metaphor for what happens when you use that style of animation and humor and gross out, scare out, freak out type thing. After a while, it all just becomes kind of, you're not really scared by it anymore. You're not really freaked out by it anymore. It's just kind of there. There's a few really well-timed jokes, some very interesting animation, and nothing really offensive here. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that it is a good episode. There is one thing that bugs me about it though. Squidward doesn't believe in ghosts. So apparently both Mr. Krabs and Squidward, who have met ghosts, i.e. the Flying Dutchman, do not believe in ghosts. I know you guys aren't following continuity, but it'd be like if Mrs. Puff said she's never met a sponge before. It's just not true. Episode 70B, Chimps Ahoy. SpongeBob and Patrick build a machine to impress Sandy's bosses, who are monkeys that are the size of squirrels, apparently. Yeah, this episode answers what Sandy's doing underwater, kind of. So she's there with the science program, I guess, to study undersea creatures, although none of her inventions in the episode actually have anything to do with being underwater. But I guess it's also made fun of in the episode where they say there's not much practical in creating tree domes underwater. So, like with all things in SpongeBob, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Anyway, this episode is alright. Yeah, it's not, like, fantastic or anything, but there's a few alright jokes, and there's really nothing bad here. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a good episode, but maybe only by, like, a hair. It's not that funny, but there are just enough jokes for me to consider it a good episode. I kinda like the joke of Mr. Dr. Professor Patrick. Something about Patrick pretending to be smart really works for this episode. Episode 71A, Whale of a Birthday. Mr. Krabs ruins Pearl's birthday by being cheap. It's one thing if you're a parent and you can't afford to give your kid a birthday party, but the fact that Mr. Krabs has all of that money and he refuses to get her even a cake is just really sad and comes off as just almost child abuse here. The episode isn't even funny. They try to make these jokes about Mr. Krabs being cheap to Pearl, but it comes off as just really hurtful and flat and just mean-spirited in every possible way. This episode is terrible. It is clearly a
Scumbob episode.
The only thing I like about it are the boys who cry. And no, I don't mean Squidward's performance, because that was creepy. And why does Squidward even like boys who cry? Doesn't he like classical music? Why would he like a cheap boy band? Ugh, this episode just is frustrating. And no, SpongeBob buying a bunch of gifts for Pearl does not redeem Mr. Krabs, because SpongeBob did it without Mr. Krabs' consent. And I'm pretty sure after the episode ended, Mr. Krabs is gonna go ahead and take all of that back. I don't care how sweet that moment looked at the end. Being a terrible parent like that cannot be redeemed by the actions of your employee. Ugh. Although, I guess it kinda clears up that, yes, Pearl is a biological daughter of Mr. Krabs because he had that "It's a Boy" banner since she was born. Episode 71B, Karate Island. Sandy must fight her way up a tower to rescue SpongeBob. So this episode takes on the whole karate kung fu genre, but it also has a lot of references to a lot of different things, from Kill Bill to Naruto. Heck, some characters even look like they're in a bad dub with their mouths not syncing up. And I don't know if this is an intentional reference to 4Kids, but there's a mention of jelly donuts. My favorite part of the episode is the whole timeshare twist. I don't really know if kids quite understand what timeshares are. I'm not even sure if I still entirely know what a timeshare is, but it's just so out of nowhere and such a stupid reason for this plot to be here. I just have to laugh at it. But yes, overall this is a good episode. There's only one thing that irks me about it, and it doesn't have to do with the episode itself. This episode was voted #1 in the Best Day Ever poll. Listen, the episode is perfectly fine. There's some great jokes that work, but come on, this is not the best episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. You can argue in the comments all you want over what the title of the best episode of SpongeBob is, but it is certainly not this episode. Episode 72A, All That Glitters. When SpongeBob's spatula breaks, he buys a fancy new one. Oh, this episode. Yeah, it's got a lot of SpongeBob screaming and being naked, and really not much else. I feel like this episode doesn't have a lot of substance. My favorite part is one of a few montages in the episode, and even that isn't actually too interesting. It's slightly amusing to see SpongeBob fight a pirate with a spatula, but Other than that, most other things in this episode just fall really flat. Plus, the episode is predictable as all get out. You know exactly what's gonna happen as soon as he gets the new spatula, and it's not really any fun to watch. Bet his new spatula isn't even hydrodynamic. But yes, this is a
SpongeBob episode.
and a particularly frustrating one. Episode 72B, Wishing You Well. SpongeBob is put in charge of the Krusty Krab's new well. So my favorite part of this episode is the songs, especially the first time he sings. There's something very ironic about SpongeBob singing about throwing your dreams down the well. I mean, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, wish for things, use the well as a metaphor for your dreams. But on the other hand, he's still telling you to throw them down a deep, dark well where no one else will ever see them. But I suppose that's the joke. Speaking of jokes, this episode also has the claustrophobic one, which is kind of a stupid joke, but it still makes me laugh every time. And there's some other good jokes in the episode. There's a few things I don't like, such as the stupid ending with Mr. Krabs turning into a crab with butter. I felt like there were more clever ways they could have made that wish come true. Also, insert your own Dark Knight Rises joke with Squidward trying to climb out of the well here. This is definitely a good episode. Episode 73A, New Leaf. Plankton quits the food industry and stops trying to steal the secret formula. I could see how this plotline could have been used as a good episode, but unfortunately, the thing's played very seriously. Mr. Krabs does something wrong to Plankton, because Plankton apparently has actually changed, and Mr. Krabs pretty much breaks into his place and breaks stuff, and then Mr. Krabs actually feels bad about it and becomes genuine friends with Plankton. It's really weird. Nothing in the episode is funny, and spoiler alert, Plankton actually hasn't turned over a new leaf, so all of it was pointless anyway. Honestly, if this were like a serious episode to transition Plankton into becoming some sort of weird knick-knack salesman, yeah, this episode could work, but everything has to go back to the reset button every single time. It's an episodic show, and if you know this, then there's no tension in the episode because obviously Plankton's gonna stay evil, and obviously it's part of some long-running scheme. If you're not thinking of that, then I guess the fake-out ending's pretty good, but it's kinda telling if that was my favorite part of the episode. Even that Robo Krabs cameo is messed up because Robo Krabs exploded. He shouldn't still exist unless Plankton tried that same plan again, but this just goes to show that even when they try to throw in a little fan service for continuity, they screw it up. This episode is certainly a
SpongeBob episode.
for not being funny and feeling too soap opera-y again. But don't worry guys, there's a much better Plankton Mr. Krabs episode coming up soon. Episode 73B, Once Bitten. When Gary starts biting everyone, they believe to have contracted a disease that makes them think that they are zombies. I should point out that this episode references both splinters and toenails. Needless to say, I was a little bit afraid. But yeah, this episode features some of that good old-fashioned bikini bottom hysteria. At the drop of a hat, the entire city will go nuts for one specific idea. The characters think they've been turned into zombies from these snail bites, and it plays upon some of the tropes, but I don't think it plays with them enough for it to actually be good parody or funny enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this episode a meh. It's got a few good jokes, and I actually do like the foreshadowing and genuine surprise of why Gary was acting the way he was, but on the other hand, you also have the stupidity of Patrick, which it's obvious from the start Patrick is an idiot and should not be telling people these things. Like, there's not really any suspense as to that, so it kind of balances out into meh category. I could see people really liking this episode, but I don't like it quite enough to be considered good. Episode 74A, Bummer Vacation. SpongeBob has to take a vacation to comply with the Fry Cook Union. What I really like about this episode is that it's very basic in its plot. All it really is that Mr. Krabs can't have SpongeBob working, so he's forced to take a vacation. But SpongeBob has to do whatever it takes to get back into the Krusty Krab so he can continue working. And matters are only made worse by Patrick taking his place, which is kind of a nod to Big Pink Loser. Probably unintentionally, but hey, it's there. With such a simple premise, you're allowed to do so many different things. I really like SpongeBob's crazy schemes to try and get back into the Krusty Krab. I like Mr. Krabs having to get rid of SpongeBob in increasingly weird ways. And I really like how this episode can go from being funny to genuinely creepy and disturbing in a matter of seconds. Both SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs act really creepy in certain parts of this episode, but it doesn't last too long, and usually it's for the sake of a joke. There's some nice subversions with SpongeBob and Patrick. It's a simple plot with a wide range of jokes, so it's definitely a good episode. Episode 74B, Wig Struck. SpongeBob starts wearing a wig. Yeah, that's pretty much the entire plot. Well, people make fun of him for it, but yeah, that's about it. Sometimes simple plots aren't always the best. I really don't like this episode, and it's pretty much because most of the jokes in this episode are repetitious. People make fun of SpongeBob because the wig looks stupid, SpongeBob misconstrues their insults as compliments and acts smug about it. Then as soon as SpongeBob loses the wig, everyone in Bikini Bottom gets one. It's not really funny so much as it is just annoying. I like the one part where everyone runs screaming out of the movie theater because of SpongeBob, and the people working there say, "I told you that movie was terrible." That's a funny line. But aside from that, there really isn't many jokes in this episode that work. And the entire plot is just kind of stupid and a little bit mean-spirited. I mean, yeah, the wig looks silly, but everyone in this episode just outright attacks SpongeBob. So I'm gonna go ahead and call this one a
SpongeBob episode.
Episode 75A, Squidtastic Voyage. SpongeBob and Patrick shrink down and enter Squidward's body to remove a reed. There's a weird joke in this episode where SpongeBob's trying to pull a reed out of Squidward's throat, and it cuts to outside, and a parent is walking with their child, and like all sorts of weird noises are coming from Squidward's house, and she covers the kid's ears. I'm not entirely sure what kind of joke they were going for there, but I feel like it's dirty. My favorite joke of the episode is when Squidward can't control his body because of SpongeBob and Patrick, who were shrunk down inside of it, and he accidentally kicks Sandy, and he's got a nice little snarky remark afterwards. Aside from that, there are some good jokes here, but nothing fantastic, really. I'm gonna have to give it a meh. Mostly because Patrick is annoying stupid instead of funny stupid in this episode. Seriously, there's a point where stupidity just gets really frustrating to watch. You can have him do a few stupid things, but when his stupidity is the driving point of the plot, it's just really irritating. And Squidward's the butt of a lot of jokes without really deserving it in this episode. Plus, I've seen this plot before. Episode 75B, That's No Lady. Patrick disguises himself as a lady. Yeah. So I'm a little bit surprised that this episode doesn't get talked about a bit more, because it's certainly interesting. Now, a cartoon character cross-dressing is something that's fairly common and has happened ever since the days of Bugs Bunny. But it's more so the fact that Patrick, in disguise as Patricia, gets hit on by everyone, including Squidward and Mr. Krabs, who hires him, literally, just so he can hit on him, repeatedly. It feels like some sort of weird PSA for sexual harassment in the workplace. It's kind of uncomfortable to watch. Now, that being said, the episode does have some pretty funny jokes with the whole concept. I mean, when Mr. Krabs and Squidward find out that it's Patrick, the reveal is truly funny and really disturbing in a really funny way. And they do play with the fact that despite everyone's attracted to Patricia, Patrick is still really disgusting and weird and rude. I honestly was not sure what to give this episode, but after rewatching it like 3 times and much deliberation, I'm gonna go ahead and call it a meh episode. Episode 68A, The Thing. Squidward gets trapped in cement, and Patrick and SpongeBob think he's a wild animal. This episode is just a terrible rehash of jellyfishing. Instead of being in a cast, Squidward is stuck in cement and they don't know it's Squidward. But of course they proceed to torture him, accidentally, anyway. And what did Squidward do that was so bad that warranted all this torture throughout the episode? Oh, he wanted a quiet day of watching public television. Oh yes, that monster. How dare he not entertain SpongeBob and Patrick's childish antics? Ugh. There really isn't much that can redeem this episode. There's a funny line about endangered species. Aside from that, there's not really much that's funny in this episode. And the only reason I like the musical twist at the end is because it's just so insanely random that somehow it works. And for a second, you think that maybe Squidward's gonna get to be happy. Yeah, it's a
SpongeBob.
You could definitely say that this episode is smelly. Episode 76B, Hocus Pocus. SpongeBob thinks he magically turned Squidward into ice cream, even though he did not. This episode starts off really strong. I like the beginning when SpongeBob's making popcorn. I thought that was a very SpongeBob sequence. And even the commercial for the Magic Kid is kind of funny, but after that, the episode is just kind of stupid. The fact that we know it's not Squidward the entire time kind of ruins it. Maybe if they didn't reveal that Squidward wasn't actually the ice cream, I would be able to think like, oh man, what's going on? What's gonna happen to Squidward? There's not really anything at stake in the episode. There's just like, okay, SpongeBob thinks it's Squidward, and also Patrick is really, really stupid here to the point where he would apparently like to eat Squidward, and top it all off with a really random parody of The Wizard of Oz. No, it's not even a parody because there's nothing funny about it. They didn't do any sort of play on it other than the fact that legs sticking out from behind the curtain was fake for some reason. Yeah, I don't really understand that joke. And it's just kind of there inexplicably. Nothing else about the episode says Wizard of Oz except for that. It just is really out of place. So, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and call this episode
Scumbag.
1. A lot of the stuff just falls flat. I don't even know if there are that many jokes to begin with, and that reference really is just pointless. Episode 77A, Driven to Tears. SpongeBob becomes jealous when Patrick gets his license. So I was originally going to write this episode off as Patrick being annoying and the episode just not really being very funny. But when I watched it again, I actually realized there are some good jokes in this. Mr. Krabs has a joke about dreams, SpongeBob and Patrick's joke about the orphanage is kind of funny, and there's a few other funny moments, but there's also some sweet moments. Yeah, Patrick is kind of a jerk, but he never really goes full-on jerk, and his actions could be explained away by him just not being very aware of how sensitive of an issue it is for SpongeBob. Also, it's kind of a callback to Big Pink Loser. Patrick finally achieves something that SpongeBob never can, and he's proud of it, so it kinda makes sense why he's being a jerk here. And besides, it's all justified because the ending is really sweet, like sickeningly sweet. But what it does is make up for Patrick's behavior in the episode. And it's also kind of nice to see SpongeBob annoyed for once. Oh, and there's also a nice little callback where Patrick reminds SpongeBob to feed Gary because he forgets sometimes. Anyway, for all these neat little references and some good funny jokes, if not too many, I'm gonna go ahead and call it a good episode. Episode 77B, Rule of Dumb. Patrick is named King and turns into a jerk. Yeah, we have 2 episodes in a row where Patrick is a jerk. But this time, there's not really much to redeem him. He is just a jerk through and through. And really, nothing about it is actually funny. My favorite part of the episode is the background music, but honestly, that's not really much of a redeeming factor at all. Besides, a lot of the same music is in Dungeons & Dragons, and that is a much better episode. So I guess you could say that the title is quite fitting. Yeah, it's
The Scumbag episode.
and it does not rule, it is only dumb. Episode 78A. Born to be Wild. SpongeBob tries to form a biker gang to fight off enemy bikers. I might be crazy, but SpongeBob's voice sounds particularly high in this episode. I mean, it's been a little bit higher the entire season, but in this episode especially. Although they also make a meta reference about how SpongeBob is annoying, so I don't know, maybe it's on purpose. The plot twist at the end of this episode is really predictable, and the ride itself isn't that interesting. I guess there's nothing particularly bad about the episode, but there's really nothing that stands out about it either. The jokes, well, there aren't too many jokes. It's just kind of There's some good visual gags, and I really like that random prospector that pops up out of nowhere, and I do like that SpongeBob rides the bubble transition. That's so random and weird. A lot of this episode is just people screaming and being afraid, and Mr. Krabs being a jerk. The entire episode is just so meh. I like that Patrick is wearing his Goofy Goober underwear, though. Episode 78B, Best Frenemies. Plankton and Mr. Krabs team up when a new business moves into Bikini Bottom. I really like this episode. Seeing Plankton and Krabs together as a sort of team, but still sort of enemies pairing, really works in this episode because it's not really something we've seen before. They've got this kind of weird Batman-Joker vibe going on where they kind of like their roles in their fighting each other. It's dissected quite nicely here, and you see it a lot better in this episode than in New Leaf. Plus, I'm a sucker for wacky schemes. Now, I'll say this episode is a little bit light on the jokes, so if it wasn't for Krabs and Plankton being really awesome together in this episode, it would have definitely gotten a meh. But because of that awesome team up, in addition to some solid jokes, it is going to get the title of a good episode. So I like the fact that a lot of things are out of focus in this episode. Yeah, there's a weird twist where the kelp shakes are turning people into like hairy monsters, but it's never really explained what's doing it, or why, or how, or anything like that, or who's behind the entire thing. Episode 79A, Pink Purloiner. SpongeBob thinks Patrick stole his jellyfishing net. It's a simple plot, but it's got some good jokes and some really good lines. In addition to that quote there's also a line about, you don't really know someone until you've stared at them through glass for 8 hours. I also like when Patrick grows an extra arm to try and protect the net from SpongeBob. The episode kind of had a secret box vibe to it, in that Patrick had a secret and SpongeBob really needed to find out. And it works pretty well. It's not a fantastic episode, but yeah, it's a good one. Episode 79B, Squidward. SpongeBob makes a puppet of Squidward, which soon replaces him. So I like the design of Squidward, or Mini Squidward as they call him in the episode. I think it's kinda cool. And the idea of the episode is clever, I guess, but really all this episode boils down to is SpongeBob annoying Squidward in the first part of it, and then at the end it's just a bunch of random dance scenes, really. And there's a bit in there about Mini Squidward replacing Squidward, and it just comes off as kind of mean-spirited, because really, Squidward's doing his best to try and be nice to people and make jokes and stuff, and Mini Squidward's one-upping him with the same exact jokes. It's episodes like these that just make it feel like the universe is out to get Squidward. And SpongeBob is a real jerk here. He is controlling the Squidward puppet, right? I'm pretty sure that's what the episode's implying, although there's a slight hint that maybe it's just sentient on its own. But either way, it's really jerky for SpongeBob to just kind of stand around and let this happen to poor Squidward. Isn't he supposed to like Squidward? Wouldn't he not want to, like, replace him? I mean, finding a little puppet to play with when Squidward isn't around is one thing, but having him replace him at the Krusty Krab? I mean, come on, SpongeBob, seriously? It's like Bubble Buddy all over again. And while it's certainly far from the worst episode, I'm gonna have to go ahead and give it a
Scumbag.
because there really isn't anything I like about this episode. And in fact, it represents a lot of how the newer seasons treat Squidward. He doesn't do anything in this episode to deserve the treatment he gets. He just wants to relax. And SpongeBob keeps on home invading him. I swear, you could take clips from this season alone and make it look like SpongeBob is a deranged psychopath stalking Squidward. Episode 80A, Best Day Ever. SpongeBob attempts to have the best day ever. Now, it's hard to talk about this episode without talking about the circumstances around it. See, Nickelodeon aired a big, long marathon all day long, pumping this up as the best day ever episode. Oh, this episode's gonna be so great. We were all expecting some kind of special, like a double-length episode, or heck, even like a triple or quadruple-length episode, or something like that, or even just a really special episode. And honestly, it's not that special. It's 11 minutes. And it's alright. It's not really bad, but it's not really funny either. There's not really like any jokes in this episode at all. It's pretty much strictly plot and music number. And don't get me wrong, the music number is great. It's fantastic. Heck, the song was pretty much the reason why this episode got made. It came out before the episode, and I feel like they were like, wow, that's a great song, so let's make an episode around it. But the rest of the episode is just kind of SpongeBob doing stuff. The episode jumps from location to location and character to character, and little things happen, but none of it is really funny. The closest they get is when they do a shtick where SpongeBob has to try and break into Squidward's concert, and that part's by and large unrelated to the greater theme of the episode. So this episode kind of has a lot of stigma because really, much like Plankton's Army, Nickelodeon hyped this thing up like crazy, and in the end, it just wasn't what everyone was expecting it to be. Is it fair to judge an episode for the circumstances around it? Maybe, maybe not, but it's really hard to separate this from the way Nickelodeon promoted it because it was promoted so heavily. Granted, they'd later use even flimsier excuses to give SpongeBob a 24-hour marathon, but it just feels kind of weird. You know what this almost feels like? It feels like maybe it was intended to be somewhat of a series finale. I mean, look at it. It features a lot of the recurring characters, except for Plankton for some reason. It's got a big music number. It's kind of grand at the end. We see Squidward even being nice to SpongeBob. He put him on the VIP list. SpongeBob helps everybody, and it kind of feels like an ending to a show like this. Of course it's not, and as I've said repeatedly, if a SpongeBob episode isn't funny, then it's not doing its job right. And the story itself is kind of satisfying to watch, but isn't great or anything. So it's on the fence, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it a meh. That being said, there are some nice things to see here, like Squidward being nice to SpongeBob, and Mr. Krabs even spending money on SpongeBob. Episode 80B, The Gift of Gum. Patrick gives SpongeBob a gross wad of gum. I'm just gonna come out and say it. I don't really have strong feelings for this episode one way or the other. I didn't mind watching it, but at the same time, I'm not really sure I could say I enjoyed it. I mean, there's nothing really terrible about the episode, but is any of it really funny? Don't get me wrong, I love the design and animation on the gum, but that's not really a joke. So, yeah. It's a meh episode. And that would be every episode of SpongeBob Season 4 reviewed. Alright, time to look at stats. So, there were 18 good episodes, 10 meh episodes, and 10 scumbob episodes. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, this is definitely a mixed season. On the one hand, almost half the episodes are good, but on the other, that's a lot of meh and scumbob episodes, and a lot of the good episodes were very close to being meh, and a lot of the meh episodes were very close to being scumbob. Of course, that cuts both ways, and a lot of the scumbob episodes were very close to being meh. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I had a hard time reviewing a lot of these episodes. If you disagree with my opinion, then hey, no problems here, because sometimes it was just so close, I honestly had to go with my gut. As for the seasonal rating, well, good episodes outnumber the meh and the scumbob, but not when you put the meh and the scumbob together. There's definitely way too many scumbob and meh episodes to call it a good season, so I'm gonna call it a meh season. If this bothers you, then take solace in the fact that statistically there are more good episodes than bad or meh episodes, and keep in mind that the meh rating is certainly the middle ground. While not a good overall experience, it still has several good aspects, which is exactly how I would describe the season. Anyway, the Scumbob episodes this season were Good Neighbors, Funny Pants, Whale of a Birthday, All That Glitters, New Leaf, Wigstruck, The Thing, Hocus Pocus, Rule of Dumb, and Squidward. I didn't really have too many expectations this time, but I will say I was pleasantly surprised when there turned out to be more good episodes than I was expecting. Now for my top 5. Number 5, Skill Crane. Number 4, Shelva Man. Number 3, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 6, the motion picture. Number 2, Krusty Towers, and number 1, Dunces and Dragons. In my opinion, I think any of these episodes could go toe-to-toe with some of the better episodes from seasons 2 and 3. That's how good they are. Now it's time for my bottom 5. And before any of you go complaining that I didn't do a bottom 5 for seasons 1, 2, or 3, remember, there were 3 Scumbob episodes total. I think you can figure out which were my least favorite episodes from those seasons. Anyway, at number 5, there's All That Glitters. Number 4 is Wigstruck. Number 3, The Thing. And number 2, Whale of a Birthday. And number 1, Good Neighbors. There's a reason why people throw that name around when they talk about bad episodes of SpongeBob. Every episode on this list was painful to watch. I seriously, very strongly dislike these episodes. There are some Scumbob episodes that I don't like, and then there are these episodes that I think are just the worst of the worst. From child abuse to SpongeBob screaming the entire episode. Ugh. Terrible, terrible episodes. And not to mention, the worst thing that you can do is the Squidward torture episode done way, way wrong. Alright, final notes. As you've heard me say repeatedly throughout this, there were a lot of good plots here that just didn't end up being funny. That's most of the meh episodes in a nutshell. I think the storytelling in this season might be better than seasons 1, 2, or 3, with more complex plots and interesting character dynamics. But if it's not funny, it's not a good episode. Plain and simple. So the bad characterization bug is here and there in this season. Aside from Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob gets it the worst. There seems to be very few episodes where he plays the straight man. In a lot, and I mean like the majority of these episodes, he's just the goofy, wacky, stupid, hyperactive kid, and seeing that all the time is really exhausting. Seasons 1 through 3, they kept a mix between stupid SpongeBob and more mature adult SpongeBob. There's a lot of instances of SpongeBob just laughing for minutes on end, crying for minutes on end, and screaming for minutes on end, neither of which are interesting or good or pleasant to the ears. So there's a few recurring themes in this season. They are therapy, photo albums, and hospitals. Each of these themes shows up in no less than 3 episodes this season. See if you can find them all. The season also felt very Krusty Krab oriented. It just seems like this season is way more focused on it than usual, and especially on Mr. Krabs, and really, it's no wonder why a lot of these episodes ended up as not being funny, because if Mr. Krabs is in them, the only jokes they can seem to make is, her, he likes money, and her, he's cheap. And in a completely random note, Plankton's mouth turned purple for some reason. Yeah, in a few episodes this season it's red like it always was, but in a few others it's purple. Why? I have no clue. SpongeBob is a lot of things, but consistent it is not. Alright, time for special thanks. Thanks to Encyclopedia Spongica, formerly known as the SpongeBob Wiki, for its wealth of information on SpongeBob. Special thanks to SpongeBuddy Mania, the awesome forum that has supported me and initially gave me the idea for this. Special thanks to Incompetech for the awesome music. And an extra special thanks to a very special person by the name of Erin, who drew most of the art you see here. Seriously, she made this video look awesome. And with that, I bid you adieu. Pie Guy rules, out.